Hello and welcome to yet another interesting conversation here at WiT-ACE. What a fantastic track of conversation on this platform that aims to redefine standards and bring together organizations, individuals, and decision makers, as much as the future workforce to collaborate towards steps that can improve collaboration and set a step-by-step progress towards creating a truly diverse workforce. The topic of this discussion today is pride and identity. Tomorrow's workforce needs support. And we've got two fantastic gentlemen with us. Hans Raja Joseph, the head HR for Novartis NGSC Hyderabad, the global service center for the group. He has had a wide array of experience spanning geographies, multicultural environments, and in different industry sectors. He's also worked with leading organizations like Syngenta, HSBC, and Standard Chartered. He's also a fellow of the Institute of Cost and Management Accounts of India, a postgraduate in personnel management from Annamalai University, and a senior certified professional from the Society of Human Resources, USA. Welcome to the chat, Hans. Harish
Thank you,
Iyer.
Josh. Look forward.
Harish Iyer is the head diversity, equity, and inclusion at Axis Bank. An old friend. He has worked as an equal rights activist for over a decade now and engages in advocacy for a number of causes, including promoting the rights of lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender community, children, women, animals, and survivors of child sexual abuse. And especially, if you remember his face, it is because he's also been on Amir Khan's talk show Satyamev Jayate in an episode on the issue. Welcome both of you on this chat, and it's an interesting conversation when we were having this chat, even offline. Let's begin with 2018, right? It was a remarkable judgment. It kind of changed a lot of things in case of practice as well as in the way that things actually started progressing in the country. You want to just bring into focus, Harish, you've been in the center of all of that at that point as well, and since then as well. How has things actually changed from that moment? Well, 2018 was ideally the time when, things kind of, changed a lot for, things here in the country, right? And, how have you kind of really, seen that space and, how has that really made the impact that the industry really wanted?
I think 2018 was a turning point. It was almost like corporations were waiting for any legality to not come on their way of extending the rights to LGBT people. But really, in India, homosexuality has never been illegal. What's been illegal is the act of having sex against the order of nature. Now, whoever defines what order of nature is and whatever the order of nature is, I think sex for recreation is also the order of nature, not just for procreation. So it was loosely interpreted, and due to which, previously before 2018, if you had to sign a form that I don't practice I'm not involved in any illegal activity, technically this is an illegal activity when you're actually having sex with a person of the same gender, or having sex, or even if you're a heterosexual person and having anal sex or oral sex. So that could be misinterpreted. And after 2018, suddenly we saw an outburst of rainbows everywhere. Even brands which were homophobic previously suddenly turned rainbow. Everyone wanted to cash in the bandwagon of LGBT, of saying that they are LGBT inclusive. But the truth is that most of them were not LGBT inclusive in reality. So one was the projection and one was the invert thing. People had not changed their policies and other things within the organization as much as they were projecting outside that they were doing a lot of things. Now, I think 2021 is when most organizations are picking up. They are speaking about issues more candidly, with more candor. Now things are picking up a little more, but I think after 2018, it was more of a deluge of rainbows, but no real action when it came to corporations.
So if you were to set up a timeline, say till 2018, everybody wanted to stay shy. Post 2018 till about 2019, everyone was figuring out, okay, how do I even, get a hang of it? What do I do? And then probably 2021, it suddenly just became, let's say pseudo, fashionable to be a part of this conversation, or in some cases, a reality on the ground, set in place where, foundations of what needs to be part of the policy started to be drafted. And well, with that background, how real has, things actually turned out in the workforce, or are things still at a superficial level?
Hey, George, it's a story of evolution. What used to be conversations hush hush and behind the doors now start to come into the main fore. And organizations and associates and employees and people around started to realize that we have been excluding a community, which we shouldn't have done. We were not identifying a particular group of people, and they are a part of us. They are one amongst us, no different. And I think that realization has started to seep in within the organizations and employees and the larger ecosystem. And that is where organizations have now started to really move from that fantasy world of saying, hey, I'm also a rainbow supporter, to really coming on the ground and saying, they are a part of us. We are with them. They are one amongst us. I think that transition has taken some time. And obviously, India has been on the forefront of that revolution. We normally tend to copy what happens in the West, but I think in this space, we have really created a niche for ourselves. And corporations have started to truly accept that this is a part of us. And that evolution in the coming years is only going to accelerate. And I think from trying to support a particular community, the future will be they are a part of us. We are no different. We all are one. And that's the story of evolution, George, the way I look at it. And corporations are building that mindset within employees and the ecosystem because it's more here. We can talk about things, we can preach things, but unless there is that personal acceptance, the change will not happen on the ground. And that is happening right now. And we are seeing that translating into true action and call for action.
And it's also interesting that you say this, because I see, Harish, who's been on the ground and have led a lot of, conversations in this space now, holding a mantle which makes things more real, right? I mean, one of the leading banks in the country having him at that position, which also means that, corporations want to actually understand from the community. The biggest confusion in the beginning was they just didn't know what to do, how to do. And it was constantly somebody who, they needed to kind of guide them and take them through that journey. How has the transition been for you, Harish?
Well, it's a lot of hard work. It's very easy to sit outside and criticize that corporations are not taking action, but to actually come inside and make the change happen. Just as it's actually a replica of what I did outside in the outside world, So previously my canvas was larger. It was the whole of India. Now my canvas is Axis Bank at this moment, but also to lead by example for other people in the BFSI sector. Not just the thing about being first in doing things, but to do it right and to not do it because it's a good to do thing, but it's the right thing to do also. Because the general conversation before has been, every time we spoke about diversity, equity, and inclusion, it was more about women. Okay, because let's face it, that's the metrics that you can actually see, because you see a larger number of women. But I would always say, for every organization that actually says that we don't have LGBTQ people, I would reply back to the person saying that, well, your organization is not open enough that LGBT people have come out of the open. Otherwise, you have 7 to 10% of any population which is not cisgendered and not heterosexual. Just that they haven't found it comfortable to come out of the closet and declare it on their thing. So I think now what we are, the world that we are in right now, we will be looking at various other factors. We'll start reporting these things. I think more and more organizations should start reporting that we have so many people who are out and who are willing to be counted as a number, as a statistic. So also come out and say that, these are the numbers that we have of LGBTQ people. These are the numbers that we have of PWD people. So diversity is not just women. That's an understanding that people are getting right now. Women are diversity, but also there are other factors to diversity: cognitive diversity, PWD, LGBT. I think these are incredibly important, and those markers become extremely important, and organizations, world over should be tracking those as well. That basically is an indicator. And it's also an understanding that when you are standing up for the least common denominator, It's an understanding that you're standing up for everyone about that as well. So it's also, it should not be a PR strategy, because here we are speaking about real lives and real people and real experiences. But when you stand up for the least common denominator, it's assumed that you're standing up for everyone else on the top. So I think that understanding is what corporations need. We are also in the journey. I'm not by any stretch of any imagination trying to suggest that we have arrived, and I never want to arrive, because society is a changing phenomena. So no one can really arrive and say that we have achieved everything. We will be evolving our policies and our practices with time as society progresses.
Globally, conversations are, of course, still evolving, but it was remarkable to see how, global MNCs, etc., presented the country, kind of, sprung up quickly and, jumped into the bandwagon, started being more public. It was almost like they had a global template available and they just, had kept it on a back burner here in India, but things just suddenly went up. How did you see that change and transition, and, cohorts which brought in both Indian and, global MNCs together for this, in this journey, kind of helped in, exchanging notes and getting things sooner done?
I think there was a lesson when it came to global MNCs. I remember in my previous avatar when I used to go to some of these global organizations, I was also told by one of the people, not from the BFSI sector, one of the organizations that oh, it's wonderful that I see you over here. You are invited, and I was paid also for that engagement. And they just told me that, oh, as long as you, it's okay that you're clicking a picture over here, just don't put it up on Facebook or Instagram. So I asked them, why wouldn't I? Why do you not want me to put this up on Facebook? And then they said, no, because of the country's regulations. I said, first of all, if you're celebrating Pride, you can't celebrate Pride in the closet. So there is no pride in the closet. Closets are dingy spaces where individuality doesn't thrive. And then, of course, I look back and I walk back to my home, telling them that I'm not going to be a part of this. If you can't celebrate me out and loud in the open, because there was no law that actually prohibited LGBT people from being celebrated. The challenge that most of the global MNCs had at that time, was the fact that many of them were doing it because their American counterparts were doing it. They weren't doing it because they wanted to impact change over here. There were some who were genuine about it, but there were some who are not so genuine about it. So I think whenever we speak about any community, I wouldn't say about LGBT alone, any minority community or any marginalized community, it's important to be intentional about it and to be vocal about it. So when we embarked on the journey, I remember my head of HR, Raj Kamal Vempati, so she called me to the room. I was 1 week in the organization. I was all suited, booted, and I went to the organization because I thought that I used to make fun of banking people all my life. So I thought banking people have to go suited, booted, and wear boring blues and grays and go to office every time. So I went like that. One day she called me to the office and she called me to her room and she was seemingly furious. And she told me, I called you to fit in. I didn't call you to fit in. I asked you to, you were called in over here because you're different. Please stand out. You be who you are. That's what we are. And that's where we coined in the tagline also, which said, come as you are. And we had our first LGBT event for the Pride Month on LinkedIn, proudly saying that this is what the conversation we are doing. We are not perfect. We have not arrived. We'll never arrive. But we are having these things. So I think one of the things that we learned from global MNCs is what to do and also what not to do. You can't do things just because others are doing it. You need to do things because you are intentional about it. So intentionality becomes extremely important.
And often answer, while you look at these larger challenges to solve and problems to, kind of create solutions for, it's often the smaller things that need more attention, right? I mean, there are other colleagues who need to be educated on how to manage or how to speak to colleagues, or what are the few things that you understand. And often it's also funny that, people don't connect because of fear. the inherent fear that I might go wrong when connecting with the community? And how often does these challenges actually become the biggest biggest real challenge at workplaces?
That's a great question. And that's a reality as well. Because whilst corporations and organizations are able to create policy frameworks and they try to go all out to really talk about some of the practices they want employees to adopt or the ecosystem to have, when it comes and gets translated at a granular level, there is always loss of translation. And I, at the beginning, also mentioned that it is all about the mindset, and it starts from there. Secondly, is adoption. If we start keeping those differences, in spite of recognizing that we all are equal, then there is a challenge that we face. The third thing that we have recognized is sometimes, whilst organizations and associates want to do, the other ecosystem does not help us. And let me give an example to illustrate this. We were looking at insurance enrollments. And in that, we found that the insurance enrollments had male and female as only two options. And then there was married and unmarried. Those were the only two options available. The other clusters were completely missing. And then if someone wanted to pick those, there was a challenge. Now, many organizations talk about having partners, right? So they are moving away from these terms of husband, wife, and spouse and all of that. They're saying partners, equal partners. Now, if we want to include a partner, how do we do that? Now, that is a challenge. So these are some of the practical challenges that we see on the ground. And corporations are now trying to work with that ecosystem to bring in that change. Let me add one more example. And it's very basic and very foundational, like a washroom. So there is a men's place and there is a women's place, but there is nothing in common. And organizations now have realized it, and many of them have started to have common places, which are gender neutral and can be used by anyone. But then the percentage of that adoption is very less. And again, it comes back to how we look at it progressively. Whilst we have laid a policy around it, we want to be an ally for Rainbow, but when it percolates down, there is definitely a loss in translation. And that is where we need to minutely focus. And the last point, George, that I would like to add is, how do I respond and react when I get to know that someone is part of that community? To me, now Harish is wearing a very nice scarf with beautiful colors, right? To me, everyone is a representation of that. We all have our colors and we all have our mindsets. But that is what makes us all together, right? But then when I get to know that someone is from a different community with a different orientation, and I start looking at that person as neglected or someone who is outside the circle, that is where also the challenge begins. So a big ask, not only from me, but from everyone, and I'm sure George, you and Harish will also agree with me, it's important that let's not differentiate. We all are one for each other and all for us. So let's maintain that.
But are they, I mean, interesting points you made there actually, Ants, and just a follow-up to that is that, are these also formed because of, the backgrounds that we come from, the safe zones that we've grown up in? So in the country itself, when you look at regional, we are a massive country with so many different regions, so many languages, so many cultures. Do you see that actually percolating that, down to those regional differences as well, where, some of us are more acceptable of diversity more than the other places? Is there some sort of a map in that color as well?
I would not call out based on a region or a particular sect, but what I will call out is the experiences that one has grown up with and our understanding of that experience. I have seen people from backgrounds, very humble backgrounds, who come and say, hey, we all are one, let's move on. But there are some very elite folks who come and still have that biases in themselves. So it is not about a background, it is not from where they are from, but it is about what our understanding is, what is the experience that we have had. And it is an evolution journey, because the more we get to know about them, the more better it is. The second part of it, George, is very nicely put by you, is the safe background in which we have grown up. Because what happens is then we say, this is a natural way of it, and this is an artificial way or a differentiated way. And anything which is not natural, We ourselves define that that is not acceptable now. And I think that is the point that Harish brought in at the beginning itself, that we have to come out of that clutter and say that this natural and artificial is something that has been defined by us, right? It's all equal. Let's ensure that we create a safe psychological zone and a safe physical zone for everyone with us.
And often, these safe zones that we kind of, believe they are, and, Harish, you would, I mean, classically as through your own example, you would bring that story out, right? Multiple times you've spoken about it, both publicly as well as in smaller groups where you've been a great inspiration, Harish. It's often these safer zones that are not really so safe. And yet, in the corporate space, we kind of, like Anne's kind of said, believe that we are in a safe zone. But is it real in the true sense? Because things can always change, right? And in the corporate world, if the person who's my senior does not accept me for who I am, it can obviously have implications on everything from my career to my future.
Yeah, I mean, the truth is awareness is incredibly important. Awareness about the fact that we all are not the same. I think the homogenization is a challenge where we think that we all could be equal in a very esoteric sense, but we are not the same. So that's something that we need to recognize. We need to recognize the fact that there is diversity. We shouldn't be painting everyone with the same brush. We are different shades of the rainbow, and it's important even for LGBT people. We are not a gay man lives with more privilege than a trans man. A gender fluid person is in a disadvantage than a masculine performing a masculine looking gay man. A feminine gay man is at a greater disadvantage than that. So you have these different nuances even within the LGBT community. We are not a monolith. Okay. And safe zones, when we especially speak of safe zones are created when you have intentional conversations with people. When you hire when you have hired a trans person, it becomes important for you to actually speak to the manager, speak to everyone else in the team, and get them acclimatized rather than getting the trans person acclimatized. The onus, our statement of inclusion in Axis Bank, and the statement that I've been repeating for ages together, is the onus of inclusion lies on those who are included, not on those who are excluded. So the ones who are in the fringes, the ones who are at greater risk of getting attacked, it's not their responsibility to try and get included. So if there's only one trans person who has joined in the team and the team has got 500 people, we should bloody hell train those 500 people, and not just not expect the trans person to fit in, but that 500 people who have to understand how to treat this one trans person. So I think that's where our challenges are, that sometimes we expect the outsiders to come in. Of course, they have to make some effort to understand processes and the way systems work in an organization, but more effort has to be put in where the majority actually sits down together and understands how to treat this one person who's different. It's not the one person who is different, that person's responsibility to learn to adapt with the outside surroundings. So I think that's something that is needed, and until and unless we develop that mindset, okay, we will keep hearing stories of people getting discriminated, people not understanding. Like, for instance, I remember a friend of mine who had basically told me that she is a trans person, she went to the organization, everyone was very supportive, but one day when she landed up wearing a sari to some Diwali celebration or some celebration within the organization, she was told by the manager, I said, we accept the way you are, but at least for public functions, don't come wearing a sari, you know? So, and she really got offended, and she called me up, and we spoke at length. And then I called up, and not my organization, but some other organization. Then I had to speak to the person, explain to the person what a trans person feels. And for the manager, it seemed very normal. I said, I'm very accepting. I just don't want her to come wearing a sari for this event. It's a public event. Why would she wear it come wearing a sari to a public event? From his point of view, all the other boxes were checked.
Right.
He was very inclusive, very helpful, very accepting, being like a father figure to the person. But this one thing hurt her.
And also then, taking the same context, and then obviously, media and the representation by the media obviously has a huge impact on how it is. And, when we've grown up, we've always seen the community being represented. Let's also look at it from a corporate perspective as well, right? In glamorous, roles, and in the advertising industry, in the media industry, etc. We've never really seen the community represented in banks and global organizations and stuff like that. OTTs have changed the game, right? It's become more real stories. Real stories are coming there. How have you seen the transition actually, changing down to the workforce itself, and how and obviously those will definitely help, tide over a few things that you mentioned, like the example that you just gave.
I think the labor market is changing. People are changing. India as a demographic has more young people. It's not to say that older people cannot be supporters and allies, but it has more young people who are, we are in the woke generation, though I might support and I might not support some of the things that they say. But now people are more vocal about this thing. They don't take discrimination silently. You have the advent of social media. One discrimination that goes out on social media, it creates organizations to change policies, to change their practices, to change their ideologies. So there is this governance framework which society is building in as well with social media and OTT platforms, media in general. I remember, George, when years back when you had interviewed me, when you were a journalist back then. I mean, hardly we had voices of
Yeah.
LGBT people, and it was a space dominated by just gay men. Now you ask for any LGBTIQ, ask for one person from, you say I koi hai kya, T koi hai kya, trans man koi hai kya, you'll always find more voices which will come out and speak. And also intersectionality now, where you're not just speaking about LGBTQ people, but you're speaking about LGBTQ people who happen to be Muslim, happen to be Dalit, who happen to be who happen to be also persons with disability. So you're speaking about intersectionality as well. So all this, I think, I will not just credit the media for it. I think society, media, society, lot many things, the law, the judiciary. The judiciary has been a great factor when governments fail to legislate, judiciary set in, and even the Madras High Court verdict recently, which actually speaks about, which actually sets the foundation against conversion therapy and other things, because basically it was a case of two women who were in love with each other and were forced by their parents to go back to their families, to their birth families, and they wanted to live with each other, and they went to the court for that. And the Madras High Court um, judge basically did his own research, got rid of his own prejudice, and then delivered a judgment saying that conversion therapy is wrong. You can't do this. So but not only do we have a medical, psychologists and psychiatrists associations coming and saying like that, the legality, the legal fraternity has also stood up and taken cognizance of the fact that these things, and corporates will have to follow suit. If not today, tomorrow. It would have been it would have been nicer if they didn't wait for legal provisions, because there's nothing that stopped them for making, for instance, making their posh policy, having a posh policy, just do the reporting of women, but actually extend it to everybody. Extend it to gay men, extend it to lesbian women, extend it to everybody. So you create a safe space like that. Create all your policies. So one thing that we are doing in Axis Bank also is all these policies where we had just not with the intent of prejudice per se. Sometimes just by practice, like you referred to me as he because you know me as he, but I go by the pronouns he or she as well. So if you said she, I wouldn't get offended. So what we are trying to do is using they everywhere because it stands for everybody. So even going to a policy which we thought would not stand for LGBT people, but it kind of discriminates against trans people, because you don't see a mention of that. What if there's somebody using the pronoun they? What if certain phrases, language can be such a great enabler, George, that certain phrases, for that matter, instead of saying mother, if you can say birthing parent, that includes trans men also, you know. Instead of saying, Anne's also touched on that, instead of saying spouse, using the word partner, you know. So just language can make people so inclusive, and also intentionally having sessions. We call it the pause for bias sessions in Axis Bank, where everyone, right from the CEO of the company, Amitabh Chaudhary, to somebody who has just joined in, everyone has gone through a pause for bias, is going through a pause for bias session, where we speak not just about LGBT, but about a lot of issues that we could, and we have gamified it a little bit so that people can intentionally participate in the conversation, and doesn't look like one top-down thing where we come up with a new thing and we want to educate you. We don't want to educate, we want to learn, and we want people to imbibe. Respect can never be a choice within an organization. It should not be left as a choice for people to respect. You might take your time to understand, but you have no choice. You have to respect people the way they are.
But is it also time that we brought in this education, and it trickled down to schools and colleges as well? Because probably that's where it all begins, right? And I often hear this conversation between, parents and parents group, etc., that, the biggest worry that they have is, and this obviously comes from the lack of knowledge, right? They feel that when kids are taught about it, they might turn towards it, but it's not that way. But how do you bring that, change the answer, in case you could, throw light on this aspect?
George, it's all about the unconscious bias that we play with. And that keeps playing in our mind again and again and again. So as you rightly said, parents feel that, well, if kids are thought about it, they may get into it or start practicing it. Now, the question that I would look from outside is, number one, if they practice, so what's wrong? Number two is, aren't we then in our own mind differentiating that this is right and this is wrong? And that is why we are now getting worried, right? This is a normal phenomenon. And as we evolve as mankind, when our kids grow, they will also be talking about the same thing. And probably what we don't want is them to come and say, hey, my parents did not give me that freedom, that liberty to choose, right? And I think that is the foundation that we need to look at. There's no right and no wrong here. It's all the unconscious bias that keeps playing within ourselves. So let's come out of it, accept everyone the way they are, allow our kids to think, to reflect, and to blossom the way they are. Otherwise, the future generation will come and say that our choices, our decisions were crippled, which is not right for a growing organization or for a growing society like ours.
And a lot of challenges with, coming out itself is about, not having financial independence, and that kind of mars a lot of these decisions as well. And with corporates stepping in and giving you the freedom to come out, it kind of just erases about 80% of all the worries, right? I am financially independent and therefore I can take care of me and my spouse. And therefore, even if I were to come out and my family is not supportive, it kind of is the biggest, support for me. From that perspective, how open and are there any, set practices, rules, etc., of how to handle a person who's normally been working in an organization as a he or as a she for the last 10 years, and suddenly the person wants to take that decision? And you may want to take that question, and then I'll, probably go to Harish for his version of the same.
Sure, George. See, at this point of time, you're right. Financial safety and financial security and stability is extremely important. And many times that could be an impeding factor of why someone is hiding the identity. Now, why is this happening? This is happening because of societal non-acceptance or that discrimination that is stepping in. The moment we create a safety net around the people, the safety net to tell them that don't worry, the ecosystem is there to support you, then the mind is liberated and folks are more than happy to look beyond financial safety because they know the moment they come out, they will be included by the other spectrum. Now, till we achieve that phenomenon or till we achieve that situation, as a society, we will be behind. Now, if I have to use a metric that normally corporations use, then I think we are at the bottom of the pyramid currently. And we need to move forward as a progressive organization. Now, why are we talking this? Why do we need that? See, only if we are able to liberate our people, right? That is when the best of creativity, the best of efficiency, the best of productivity will come in. And that's very important for mankind at this point of time. So if you're not able to liberate that, if you're not able to provide that safety net, which today unfortunately is not the situation, let's accept it. And that's where it's important that together we work towards providing that ecosystem for them to get liberated.
And often, Harish, do you see that? I mean, I've noticed over the years that you've been a counselor, a shoulder to cry for so many people, young and old, as much as now for corporates as well, right? So, I mean, everything doesn't need to be so serious in life, right? I mean, when it comes to the LGBTQ conversation, everybody suddenly, buckles up. It's a very serious conversation. Everybody wants to be right. Nobody wants to make that mistake. And that often is probably the biggest barrier, right? I mean, why can't we just laugh about things? Why can't, I mean, maybe I don't know things, right? And which is why I've made a mistake, but why should I be pulled up for it, right? It should be normalized too. And that probably could be the biggest barrier. I mean, and you usually have a lot of funny instances and stories to narrate in that space.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I have the distinction of walking into various offices, speaking to CEOs of various companies, including mine, and using words like penis and vagina within within the corporate landscape. And I'm
Do
speaking
you
about
do, do you
trans
also
rights.
click a picture of the person, and the expression on his or her face when you say that?
I think I have a
Especially in
picture.
corporate life.
I think I have the picture of theirs in my mind, ingrained forever. The horror images that suddenly be like, because I'll just walk in and I'll speak about because many people don't know the difference between transgender and intersex. Um, people don't know the difference between transgender and hijra, or if there is a difference over there. So because many a times I think that we operate from the point of not knowing, not from the point of prejudice. Sometimes it's that I just don't know, so I do the wrong thing. So it becomes important that with that you kind of clear people's minds, and sometimes you need to, and the best way to do that is to just say that sex assigned at birth, use words like sex assigned at birth, born with a penis, born with a vagina. So basically I just use these words without, for me there is nothing, there is no and it's far more difficult. You asked the previous question about schools and colleges. It's far more difficult to speak to corporations than to children. Children very easily absorb these things. Like if I was to speak to your child and tell him about, that this is cisgender, this is transgender, this is penis, and I say without me feeling shy about it, your child will absorb it. But if I tell a corporation, because you have to get rid of the baggage that they already have to learn something. They have to unlearn something to learn something, right? So that's one thing that happens, and that has happened many a times in various organizations. Even my own, like sometimes when, not that I just speak about penis and vagina all the time, but sometimes when you're speaking about when I'm speaking about transgenders and people have a question to ask, I don't, I don't mince words when I speak about these things. So there is of course a level of decency in the way you scientific temperament when you're actually saying these things, so that it doesn't look like you're sexualizing the whole conversation. But these things, I mean, who are we talking about over here? We're speaking about adults who possibly are are having active sex lives and active lives, and you suddenly feel scared and scandalized when you use these words in the thing. So I've had many funny moments. Also, I've had moments like I just told you, where people would come and tell me, oh, why do you have to be so gay? Okay. And I would tell them that, okay, why are you so straight? you know why are you so heterosexual? You stop being heterosexual, I'll stop being gay. And there's nothing like so gay. The other thing that I've been asked quite often is is they'd come and make a big show about accepting you, that I'm very accepting of you. Then I remember I was speaking at this forum where somebody on stage said that our organization is very accepting of LGBT people. So I just went on stage and I said, my community is very accepting of heterosexual people. And I just smiled. And then there was a moment of silence, and then everyone clapped. So equality cannot be charity, and there needs to be equity before equality. And that's something that I bring forth, sometimes with humor, sometimes by just being not explicit, but being direct about conversations and not mincing words. I think people should shun this silence about packaging things in a beautiful way and presenting it. Things need to be presented the way they are. And of course, it depends. You give different doses to different kinds of audiences. I can't go to any audience and speak like this, but wherever I can, I do. So it's a learning journey. I know that I like to startle people. I don't do it purposely to startle them, but when it happens, I really love the reactions.
The shock and awe really works there. Where we've got 5 minutes on the clock now, and while I come through towards concluding the conversation, a quick one between the two of you. COVID-19 has been a game changer, not only for us but for the world, right? Workforces, workplaces, etc., is not going to be the same anymore. The way we work, function, the way we interact with each other is going to be different. Is that really an impediment for this journey that diversity has actually pulled up for itself in the last 3 years? And how do you kind of cross over that challenge with all of us working from our own comfort, from homes, etc.? In fact, organizations are also now still challenged and haven't really found a solution towards whether it should be a hybrid workforce, whether it should be, at any point in the near future, would we be able to come back and be the normal that we were in? So how do you bring that forward, Ans, and how do you build the diversity conversation in with all these challenges that we're facing through?
George, I see a great opportunity here. Whilst COVID pandemic put us back by a few years, I see great opportunity because so far there was a physical institution called an office or an infrastructure called office. Now with people working from wherever they are, the jobs start going to them. And I think that is an opportunity for organizations to become more diverse and more inclusive, not only in policies and letters, but in the true spirit of it. And organizations which are able to make use of that, like our organization, my organization, have been able to benefit from it, because the barriers of being in one location is gone. Second, the barrier of ensuring that we have this infrastructure in place and then we dovetail everything and we put a timeline for people to come in and come out is gone. So there is greater flexibility for everyone. People have a choice in the way they do work and in the way they deliver on their work. However, having said that, there is also an opportunity to ensure that the level of consciousness is increased amongst our associates in the ecosystem. And I say this for all corporations, because when you talk face to face in person, you are able to see the expressions and you are more mindful. But sometimes in a virtual setup, that mindfulness sometimes goes down. We take things for granted, or we are not truly focused. So I think there is an opportunity for corporations and for the ecosystem to ensure that the level of biasness is reduced and people are more acceptable the way they are. So overall, I clearly see this as an opportunity for corporations to increase diversity, not only by the policy, but by the spirit of it.
Interesting points there. And, like Harish mentioned when we were speaking offline, sexuality is field agnostic. And therefore, with the space that you are in, Harish, there's a lot of changes that you can bring along with policy and make it real for Indian organizations as well. With workforce decisions now being taken, policies being revisited, it's probably the best opportunity to be in that position and space to, advise and take that forward.
Yes, I mean, queer people were thought that we are only fashion designers and in the creative field, either we are some creative director or fashion designer. And in fact, in my previous avatar, I was the creative director, but that's got nothing to do with the fact that I was gay, that I am gay. But yeah, people never thought that, possibly you'll find a banker I've dated many gay bankers and many gay lawyers, but I never thought ever in my life that I would be landing up in a field. But that also breaks that stereotype, an out and proud queer person in a field which is considered to be too blue collared, and where people there people think that it doesn't have scope of creativity. But the truth is creativity thrives in spaces like these. You just need an open mind to be creative in every field that you are in. In fact, I think I'm at my creative best over here in the campaigns that we do, in the conversations that we have, in the training programs that we do. So I think there is every field has queer people. It is not that we are concentrated to any field. What you stated is right, that you'll find a gay banker, you'll find a gay, not just this field. I mean, even if was to talk of social evils, you might find a gay terrorist also. So so we are not just in the good parts of the world, but you'll find us in the bad parts of history as well. You'll find us everywhere. So we don't become holier than dove or holier than cow uh, when we happen to be from the queer community. We are evil in our own ways. We are not the same people. We are different, but at the same time, there is lot. We are in the end humans, so we have the same goodness and the badness that exist in the world. So that's something that people have to realize. Yeah.
And that definitely brings us all together. What a fantastic discussion we've had here. Openness to accept each other and the willingness to work with each other probably is probably the solution towards getting everything together in the workforces. Thank you so much for all your beautiful comments here, and conversations, of course, continue on WiT-ACE.
Thank you, George.
Thank you, George.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you
Harish.
so much.